everyone. Welcome. My name is Shane. Some of you may know me as the person who wrote the Ruiner blog, but my name is Shane. I'm here today with Christine Anderson. Said that correctly?
Yeah.
And I always have a hard time with this one. Claudia Ayas.
Yeah.
Of Earth Empaths. We're going to flip the script a bit today. Last time you heard us all together, these two lovely ladies here were interviewing myself. We're going to flip that a bit, and I'm going to interview Christine a little today.
Yeah.
It's not going to be a totally formal interview, more just a conversation that I feel that some people may benefit from hearing, and so that's going to be that. The first thing I want to do is kind of give you a chance to do something that I've noticed recently that you've never had the chance to do, which is kind of introduce yourself. I mean, you guys started working on your website, and we've kind of got to know you through interviewing other people and through your writings and whatnot, but we've never actually said, hi, Christine, who are you and where did you come from, and how did you get to creating or co-creating Earth Empaths?
Okay. Yeah. Well, that question of where did you come from is a big one, isn't it? But yeah, I have thought about, how do I introduce myself? I mean, I am a little bit known through, some other interviews that were done and some snippets in the healing work that we did while we were on the Project Avalon forum. So, there is stuff out there, but nobody's really asked me about who I am. And, why am I here talking to this camera and talking to people and doing the work I'm doing? And, I've often said, and anyone that listens, I'm nobody, I'm nobody special. I don't have any lineage that I know of. I don't come from an Illuminati family. I'm just a person that grew up in Southern California. I'm sure I had anomalous experiences as a child. I don't have full recall of them, but enough memories come back that would indicate to me that I did. And I was extraordinarily shy as a child and an empath. And so I probably have a really, and I learned to overcome that shyness, that inability to talk. People see me as very accomplished in the way I speak. They think I'm very outgoing, and not really realizing that it was a long process for me to be able to come forward, voice my opinions, speak my truth, get over my own inner demons, childlike and other, So that's just a little bit about me as a younger person. Always had a pulling and an extraordinary desire to heal. And, I've never, and I've also never taken the path of becoming a professional. That was an antithesis to me of a true healer, was to go to somebody else and get a title and say, I'm this person. And yet that was a big conflict for me, because being in the matrix world, it's sort of a requirement for you to hang the shingle out and put your name out there and say you're this and you're that. And it just could never happen for me. And the other thing I never did, and I'll say a little bit about what I've learned and what I practiced, I never charged. Later on, and I was 23, I had a very deep prophetic dream. I was working as a bartender, was working as a manager of a discotheque in the heyday of, the Bee Gees and John Travolta and all of that. And I woke up one morning from a night out and tending the bar and all of that. And I woke up out of a dream where I literally had found myself climbing on my hands and knees. One of these arduous dreams where you're just going up a mountain, and I was barely making it, bleeding hands, bleeding knees, and a lot of pain. I reached the top of the mountain, and a very bright being of light, one might describe her as Mary, I don't really know, but was really standing there emanating at me. And when I woke up out of the dream, I had a voice in my head that said, you have to leave where you are now, or you're going to die. It was that simple. I've had several of those since. 2 months later, I found myself with a backpack. I had my nighttime disco clothes on, been out drinking and doing what people did during those days with a backpack, and nothing more in Mexico City. And from there, that was the beginning of me finding out who I was, why I was really here. And I started to be able to, freeing myself up from the US, I was able to start to follow a different guidance or a different thread. It was not easy. I mean, finding myself there was not an easy passage. So I got into, I was in a very alternative town. A lot of healers, a lot of people at that time. The New Age movement was just starting. So a lot of free thinkers. John Muir was there from the Muir Publishing Company out of Santa Fe, Mexico. Some pretty extraordinary people I got exposed to. Psychics, clairvoyants, astrologers. I mean, everybody was here. So it started me on my spiritual search. Always still, though, I kind of followed that line of healing. So I learned midwifery. I learned homeopathy. At the same time, I always had a business going. I started with my own business. And I always felt deep inside that charging for healing work just never really worked for me. And so that's where I was. I was in Mexico, a young woman, started my own business, doing the work I did in an alternative community, doing a creative work. I designed and made women's clothing, was married, ended up having a daughter. And that was that. It all was beautiful. I was part of a metaphysical group, a very dear, dear friend of mine, who's still a dear friend. That was very instrumental in my life and, helping me understand that I had a deeper longing than most people did. I wasn't really content to live on the surface. She once told me that I was the only person of, the hundreds that she had taught over the years that actually wanted direct experience. So it wasn't just looking for a kind of a surface happy life. And so I was there. I was very content in that. I had probably everything anybody within the matrix would really want. I had a nice home. I had a flourishing business. I had good friends. I was doing a satisfying work. All of that was just, one could have said that would have been a satisfying life. And I guess as a lesson, do you mind if you just go on? You've got me on this roll here because there's
no, go nuts.
Here. I guess one could say that there's deep lessons here because I actually, there's always things within any life that don't quite fulfill, right? And I had gotten to a deep place where it was literally, I was soaking and meditating in a bath, which I commonly do, and I just had this deepest epiphany of my life at that moment where everything was perfect, everything fit. And I was so satisfied and I was so full of gratitude for everything that had been given to me that I literally started, I would say that was when I really started vibrating at a different frequency, was that much gratitude. And I could call that gratitude love was coming through me. And I think for the first time I really knew love in that moment. And so I just was like, great, if this is what my life's about, I'm happy. I give over to it, and that's that. Well, 2 weeks later, I didn't have that life. 2 weeks later, that life was gone.
What? How did that change? What changed there?
I was, because of the healing aspect. I have a very deep relationship. Well, we could name him many things. We just could call it Christ, or we could call it Yeshua, or all the different names that this avatar goes by and has been on our planet. I've always had a deep, not religious, nothing biblical about it, but just a feeling. So I was asking a question at the time. I was like, if he could heal with his hands, if he could do these healings, if he could, touch somebody and they would be healed, then I can do that too. And so I looked for a teacher, and I ended up finding a Reiki master through my friend, my spiritual teacher friend. She's found this man, and so I started going, and I actually went for a while to translate for her because she didn't speak Spanish. And while I was sitting there with him, of course, I became very interested in what he was doing in Reiki. And he did chakra balancing, and he used a pendulum, and he did Reiki. And very charismatic Mexican man, had an office in our town. And so I just asked, I said, well, I want to learn. And he said, sure. And so I went, and what he did was he put me through the Reiki initiations like really fast. He the first two flipped I literally flipped. I flipped polarities is the only way I can describe it. So all of a sudden my inner life was outer. And I guess it would be akin in a certain way to a Kundalini experience. So I was so vibrant at that time, and I was so in the astral that I was barely on the planet. I mean, I was barely in the reality, the matrix reality. So, and it was so fast, it really was, that I literally couldn't operate anymore. And that was that. Turned out later that this man and his wife, he wasn't, he was using Reiki and that type of energy. He was actually, I would call him a black magician or a energy vampire. That's quite a long story. I don't think I want to go into all of that right now. It was the first time I had contact with somebody of that nature. Worked my energy body, and I started to see him working other people's energy bodies. I was in love with him because, he was like this big guy to me at that time. Like, he really had so much power, I thought. Now I look at him and I go, ugh. But so that, and within 2 months of that, I had left my home, I was separated from my husband. I went off to live by myself. And I spent about 4 months. When I realized what this man was doing, I spent about 4 months in a major astral battle for my life. And it was heavy duty. And at that point, I knew I had stepped into another world and another reality. So, that was my indoctrination in this life into that type of practice of magic and energy hooks and psychic recordings and the whole deal. So, yeah, so it was a pretty deep, dunk in the dark waters.
I guess so. It's an unfortunate reality that a lot of people kind of get into these groups, and some of these groups are, as you experienced, put together by someone who's doing it for all the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
They're not really there to try and help others. They're there to try and help themselves. And unfortunately, it sounds like that's what you bumped into.
Yeah. And this is only the first one. This isn't the real story, not the one I really want to tell. That was my preparation, I think. So.
Well, you can see through that how it kind of comes in a stage, because you started off at a really good place. And then that really good place led you to a place that you thought was even better at first. And then it kind of brought you down a bit and gave you a taste of, let's call it the darker side of these groups and spiritual teachings in general.
Yeah.
And then from there, where did you go from there? How was it
a
matter of building yourself back up?
Yeah. What happened was, it was really very interesting, because all of a sudden I also had all sorts of abilities that I didn't really realize I had. And this is really going to be a part of what I want to talk about, was that when you have like a Kundalini experience or the rising of the energy center, you are actually walking into power. And power itself is an elixir, and power can take one over. And that was really what was happening. I mean, this power had started moving through me. So like I could read things. It was bizarre. I mean, everything was alive. That wasn't everything. Everything was alive. The paintings on the wall, the trees, the paint, the people. It was so overwhelming to be in that type of a reality. And so the thought that came in there was, well, you must be special, right? And
of course.
Right. So
of course.
Right. And so I was like in that you are special, and oh my God, you must be really special, and this is it, and you're going for it, girl, and all of that. And I had spontaneously started reading tarot cards, which I've never learned or done, and I would read them every day. And then one day I did a reading for myself, and the last card was the devil. And when I looked at it, my whole consciousness woke up, and I was one of those moments of like pure horror when I realized what had really been going on, that this man had actually been using me as a puppet and had total control on me. I actually had dreams of him like holding strings and moving me around. And so when I had that realization, it was so body-like that I actually started throwing up. I got diarrhea. I started bleeding. I mean, it was like, it was pretty deep at that moment. And so that's when I went into the battle to release myself from those strings, and learned a lot about that, and learned a lot about how an ego structure within a person allows that to happen. I never blame that person. That's one of that's really strong in me. I don't blame others. So from there, Shane, just to move that one along, that it had its lessons. After that was over, and after all of that died down, and everything calmed down in my life, I remembered those experiences, and there's kind of a part of yourself that wants them again because they were so extraordinary. So was looking still. I was looking for what's next in this life of mine, right? Where do I go from here? And one of the proclivities I have, I guess you would call it, is that if something comes into my field or my view that I haven't seen or experienced before, it's going to usually get my attention.
Good old curiosity.
Yeah, I know. Well, I've gone through, and I think a lot of us do in this, a true seeker that's seeking their own inner truth or their own inner gnosis is going to experiment with or look through perhaps a lot of the other philosophies out there. Some of them very deep, but we've got Buddhism and Christianity and all of that. But none of that would satisfy me, because it was like something in me was driving me to find something else. Something new.
There was something missing from it all that
you
knew was out there, and you couldn't find within that material.
Right, or like I'd already done that.
Yeah.
It was like a review. So it was like, okay, well, wait a minute. There's something driving me. That's just me. And so during many years passed. I don't really want to go through my whole story here. I ended up remarrying another shaman type person. And that relationship was extraordinary, I mean, in many, many, many ways. But like a lot of these kind of like love bite or twin flame relationships that are so extraordinary, when it turned, it went really bad. And I tried. So at that moment, I had a very good friend I used to go visit, and he had a esoteric bookstore, and I would sit and talk with him, and he always kind of helped me through my trials. And so I was sitting there with him one day, and we were talking, and he said a couple of things, and it was just like something would click me, and I was like, "You teach something, or you have a teacher, don't you?" And that's my own. Like, yeah, I do. And I just went, okay, I want to know what you want. I want to know what you know. I want to know what it is that there was kind of a mystique about it, or just a kind of mystery, and I felt something drew me in. And so I was brought into this group, and this is the group that. And I'm going to jump a little bit into why I'm talking right now, why we're having this conversation, if that's okay.
Yes, please do. I mean, just for the listeners, I guess this conversation did come about for a different reason other than me wanting to ask you some questions about yourself. You do have something that you would like to say, and this is a good segue into that. So go right ahead.
Okay, so what I'm about to talk about, first of all, was at the end of this story, I was actually cursed. I was sentenced in a cosmic sentence, okay, that just about destroyed me. And so for me to even talk about it publicly is a big challenge. And this is my story, all right? This is probably the fundamental reason I'm here right now, and what I've been able to understand about our journey, and my journey and our journey, is because of this experience. And yet it's so deep in me, it's going to be hard to get it out. So I'm going to kind of count on you to bring it up. But what happened, and people listening to this will know that I was married to Bill Ryan, and I still am. I mean, we're still legally married. And there's a whole process going on right now. There's a revealing happening. I want to say publicly that I have no intention to hurt or to harm, as wanting only but to bring light, to bear witness on something that needs to have the light shone on it. And this is really from the deepest part of me. something really evil happened there, something that just kicked me into gear. And I'm going to take this that kicked me into gear and I want to bring it into something that's positive. So when he sent out a message to 20 people, several of them my dearest and nearest, telling my story from a very, very, very distorted point of view. He took something that was sacred to our relationship, to promises made, and sacred to me, that I was able to reveal this story to him with the absolute certainty and his word that it would never be used. And I'm going to say this to all of you. If you're doing any work with anybody, even if it's a good friend right now, if somebody tells you something from the deep part of themselves, the worst thing you can ever do is take that and use it against them. I mean, this for me, I call it high treason. To me, it remains high treason until there are amends made. And so, but
I would agree with that. I think like everyone has their own inner story and everyone has a right to keep that private. And if they do want to expose it, they also have the right to expose it on their own terms and through their own storytelling. No one has the right to take that story from another person and put it out for everyone to see from their own point of view without permission. And that's something that I think is important here for people listening to remember when they're dealing with other people. There's a reason why, therapists and counselors swear oaths to keep things confidential. And it's not about keeping secrets. It's about privacy. Everyone has a right to privacy.
Yeah, thank you for saying that, because this is one of the big boogaboo, things that people get diverted off of all the time about, secrets versus privacy. There are things that hurt people inside. There are deep pain, okay? And as I will talk about this, what actually happened was this curse, which has taken me from 2006, when I was ejected from Mexico with the most horrendous trail of demons following me, that were going to keep me from ever having any interaction with humanity ever again. It took me from 2006 until 2012 to be able to even talk about it. I mean, I was told that if I said anything or ever had contact with anybody again, I was prohibited from seeing my family. There were places I was not supposed to go back to. I was told that if anybody I helped me, they too would bear the burden of my curse. I was separated from humanity for all time. I mean, it's one of those things that you just can't even imagine it. I don't think I can actually do it justice unless there's somebody listening that's had something similar. But that's how it was. And within that curse is a being. And within that curse is a dark energy of the darkest nature. And so when this was told, and it was told to people without my permission, and what got twisted was what he said when he said it was that those people, while they did do a very nice job with me, were actually right. I actually was an evil being, and I actually did do harm. So he literally revoked the curse. That's really what he did. And by not being able to get to me, which he's been trying to do for a long time, he went for those the closest to me. And I say now, and I will say this on camera, it was a conscious act to do harm. So this is the thing, if we don't know ourselves, if we don't moderate our own being, if we are so full of either our own rage that we would send something out to do harm for 2 weeks now, 2 weeks today, we have been under siege. And I'm not just, Claudia's here with me. She'll give testimony to this. There are others that will give testimony to this, what we've been dealing with. So I have to call it out. I have to call it out as a sovereign being so that there can be amends made, so that the person and the people involved in this, and every single person that's right there behind it is involved in this. And this isn't about me. This isn't about any one person. This is about us, our humanity. This is about how do we deal with evil friends? Do we go away? Do we turn a blind eye? Do we say, oh, he must be right and she must be wrong? It's not going to get us anywhere. And this is my passion. This is my passion. And this is what I learned during 4 years of my life, where I was submersed with a dark master. I was in his field for 4 years. And nobody can really know what that's like. And he was a dark master. Do I have any ill feelings towards this being? I don't. He served a purpose in my life. He serves a purpose probably in everybody's life that he touched. But it's up to me, the being, to know what to do with what I learned. That nobody can take away from me. That nobody can tell me. And I'm sorry, Bill Ryan, if you're hearing this right now, you have no right to it. And I told you that when I was with you. I don't know how many times I said, you cannot speak for me. You do not have permission to speak for me. Because I already saw this coming. So I'll drop that one here. I don't know if anybody wants to say something behind these words. But I am calling it out for what it is. And I am asking for amends. Damage was done. Harm was let free. There are people suffering right now because of this. How does one take this back? That's a good question. I mean, really, Shane, within the world of this type of sorcery, how does one take back the harm that they threw out into the world?
Well, in my experience, the best way to start is to, notice that you've made such a mistake, that you have done harm, and to just, learn from that and know not to do it again, to stop repeating the same mistakes. See, we all kind of, at one point in time or other, we all fall into all the same mistakes. What kind of defines us is breaking those cycles before they become something we're locked into in terms of a loop. So if you find yourself in a situation where you have knowingly done harm, you can forgive yourself and then move forward in such a way where you don't repeat that mistake. You don't do that to another person, and you don't repeat it. It's that simple. Just don't repeat things. Mm-hmm. Break cycles, get out of the chains, and move on.
Okay.
For people on the other side, like the receiving side, it's very much the same thing. One thing I always repeat is, it's not what happens to the being, it's what the being does once it happens to them. This is true for both, someone doing harm and for someone receiving harm. Mm-hmm. You both have an equal responsibility to not allow what happened to define who you are, and to use it as a stepping stone to grow. Mm-hmm. So it's always a blessing, even the worst situations that you found yourself in your life, all of these different people that we've attached ourselves to, who have done us harm. In the end, it's a lesson learned. Mm-hmm. And we can't sit there pointing the finger at them saying, this is all your fault. Yeah. We have to move on from that place and say, what am I going to do now?
Right.
And what you're going to do now is continue doing what you were doing anyways. And that's how you break that curse that was put on you, back whenever it was put on you, is to defy it, is to not allow it the power that it wants to have over you. As you've pointed it out, the energy hooks, that's how this works. They get people, dark magicians, they get a piece of you and they put a hook in that, and they've got that. And as long as you allow that to be something that they can hold over you, they will always have something over you. As soon as you can look at that and say, that has no power over me, that has no power over you.
Right. Right. So let me jump in just a little. So we have levels, obviously, or intensities of how we're dealing with certain sort of energies, right? And that's why I'm really speaking right now. If this was just between me and one other person, I wouldn't be speaking. But we're dealing with a community here. And yes, we're dealing with a community, a large community, and it's not just a forum. There's a larger community here. And so when you actually use the psychic intent, or you take the consciousness of a group of people and project it onto someone else, or in this case, both Claudia and myself, why Claudia got thrown into this is still beyond me. I mean, I think Claudia and I know why. But for any logical, there's got to be a dissonance here, because we're talking about a thief, an embezzler, and then all of a sudden we've got, to my lab, soul harvesters doing an unethical work. And so, there's some logical dissonance. There's a cognitive dissonance here that it's so shocking for me that more people haven't really woken up to. It's blatant in that way. And, so there are deep psychic ties here. And part of what I want to do when we're talking today is to break those psychic cordings, because I'm not going after anybody. I'm not going after anything. I'm not going back on any tact of that. I don't want to keep those energy cords alive by any means. But we're not talking, again, just one person. So, it's like a consciousness act, but at some point, Claudia and I both knew, especially when the black magic aspect came into it, that we had to ethically stand up and speak. So there's an ethics to that too, because otherwise that energy was going to be given the free will that it wants through all sorts of people. And, so it takes a lot of force and I want to say it this way, it takes a lot of force to hold your ground of your own inner truth and your own inner light at the onslaught of so many people's consciousness being directed against you. And yet it's the most refining process for me, because I've realized for me to speak, I have to refine as many aspects of myself that might hold any negativity, or I'm going to be consumed by this. So I'm actually, in a certain sense, I'm in gratitude for this happening, because it allows an aspect of to come out of me, out of Claudia. It brings up some strength that I didn't know was there, and it's like I'm in a fine tuning right now of like how I don't want to go back at this. This is not about that. How do I use this as an ethical being to bring something to consciousness of consciousness of a mass of humanity that's watching this unfold right now. And so, perhaps going a little bit deeper into what happened, I'm going to talk about the mandato. I'm going to talk about a man named Alejandro. I'm going to talk about a group of people that live at a small coastal village in Mexico, very handful of people. And I'm going to talk about what it was like to be involved with somebody of the nature that I was involved with, and what I learned from it, and why I got there, which is key. What parts of me, what aspects of myself were not clean yet? What parts of myself were still looking for self-fulfillment? What parts of my ego were still being played out? And that's truly what any master, whether they play the dark hand or the light hand, ultimately will do with its student or its acolyte, is bring out their own inner darkness so they can see what it is. And in that way, I have just a huge not a debt, I don't have debts, a huge amount of gratitude for this experience in my life. Because the torture that I went through and what I went through during that time, the type of training I got, the belittlement of myself, of my ego, the playing with me, the psychic attacks in the middle of the nights, the demonic playouts, all of that was going on at such a constant, heavy rate during this time that I was there. The cognitive dissonance that I was suffering constantly. I didn't know from one minute to the next sometimes who I was, and yet I was being played. I was being played. I was having somebody play me. They were bringing up my own energy, right? And then when they finally, I was finally taken out. It was crazy. It was spiritual boot camp. We were asked to do things that were just so out of the normal within even the context of the Matrix. It just didn't fit. And in my mind, I knew that that's what I needed. I knew that's what I wanted. I needed to be busted out of my belief systems. I wanted to be busted out of this matrix. I wanted, but the serpent, or not the serpent, the whisperer that came through all of that was, you're special. You're a chosen one. And this is something that anybody that has this going on in their consciousness has to step back from, because that's how we were made to feel. That we had some special knowledge that nobody else had, and we were 11 people on the whole planet. We were, in Spanish, los portadores de la luz cósmica, which means the light bearers of the cosmic light. And we were tasked with holding that light for the planet. So that gives one the immediate sense of elitism, superiority. I'm special, right? Only us, right? And we were not allowed to talk about it at all.
In society or a group of that nature is to, have that one little tidbit that they can say, you've got this and nobody else has got this, and that's what makes you important. That's what makes you special.
Exactly. I'm sorry, there's a dog barking right now, but yeah, exactly. And yet, for me, it's become a passage without having, finally and ultimately understood that aspect of myself. So that means, what was I at that time? Well, I wasn't a pure light being at all. I was dealing with huge amounts of my own ego. I was also dealing with a steady stream of past life memories coming up, many times of which I held positions of some importance, in the sense of, either priestess or even goddess. So all of that was coming up, and I was reliving it, which is a valuable experience. I mean, it was actually, and that's why I say the man Alejandro was actually feeding that energy into me, so that these aspects of myself were coming out into play, so that I would see them. I didn't know that at the time. You see, I was pretty full of myself at the time, but in that whole aspect that was happening, there were things that were asked of us that never felt right to me. And that's where one has to pin their own authentic, ethical, essential self. Is like, there's always a part of us that knows ultimately inside what's right and what's wrong. And we may go along with a lot of other people, we may go along with a lot of other things, but that voice, for whatever it's worth, it never goes away. It's always there. One just has to learn to listen to it. And, I was even aware during the upheaval of many years. I mean, it was crazy. It was just really, really crazy stuff. That voice, when I look back, is always there. And so one of the tasks that we were given was to mark people. In other words, if somebody attacked us, and see here, this is going to play right into the psychology of people that need to make enemies. All right. A lot of people, and somebody knows who I'm talking about, needs to have an enemy to feel right. So we had lots of enemies. And as a group of people, because we were kind of odd, we certainly called a lot of attention to ourselves. We had several businesses. I was spending my business money rapidly. We put up 3 businesses. We built a 3-story building complex of apartments. I probably burned through about, sold a business, sold a property. I probably burned through about $800,000 in the time I was with them in 3 or 4 years. I was basically supporting the group because I had a very profitable business. So just to go for that, so people know that but I was willing to do it. I was willing to give up everything for my own spiritual path, and I still am. So what was I saying? Okay, so during that time, these aspects of we were the light bearers. There was a lot of stuff hooked to Jehovah. Wasn't talked about. It wasn't a religion. We did a lot of free consciousness channeled writings, and we would get together and we would ask questions and we would receive answers, and a lot of it was really okay. But the ask to me of the enemy is the thing I want to get to, and the thing that never sat really right with me, but I went along with it. and that's to my own detriment. And I will say this here because it's like pulling back any energy, any harm I did during that time, was that if anybody attacked us, and there were plenty, and a lot of perceived attacks. If anybody really didn't agree with us, they got marked. Okay, so we were given this duty to mark people, right? So that these higher beings or these higher conceptos, okay, this is like, I'm talking according to them right now, if they ever hear this is the blasphemy of blasphemies that I'm speaking of, all right? That the conceptos would mark these other souls for future treatment. Now, that could be seen as bad or good. I don't know. I didn't even know what it meant, but I went along with it, but it didn't feel right. So, and so here we were. We needed to have, like, somehow we were creating enemies. By our very existence, we were creating these enemies. And we had put ourselves in some sort of elite position. So I remember with more frequent frequency, like we would, be in a meeting or something, and, we would talk about our enemies, and we would, talk about, what had to be done with them. I started becoming very out of sync with that. And as soon as I started to go, wait a minute, I'm out of sync with that. That's not right. That I can't, I kept going along with it because I didn't want to lose the group. I went out of resonance, and because every person in that group was a highly developed psychic. And so that was sensed immediately. And so all of a sudden, me from this golden girl that was buying putting up buildings and building, I could get anything done. I mean, man, you wanted it done, you ask Christine, she'll do it for you. They had me up on that level of, the Wonder Woman sort of thing. And as soon as my consciousness kicked in, without me even saying anything, it was detected. And they started turning. And all of a sudden, when I'm saying this right now, and probably you feel this, God, Shane, I can feel it with you. It's like all of a sudden you see like these people that you thought were your friends, and all of a sudden there's this sort of demonic aspect, and you're dealing with something totally different. And so I started to feel like I had to hide, and at the same time, I was determined to be good and reveal all and not hold anything back from these people that were my brothers and sisters. So it was this constant cycle of fear, confession. Sound familiar? Sounds like a Catholic church, doesn't it? Yeah. But I was now suspect. I started to become the scapegoat. So all of a sudden I was like, everything, all these eyes were cast on me with suspicion. And I started being chastised, belittled. Fear was being driven into me that I was going to do something horrendous. I was going to do something so horrendous that I was capable of, like, literally destroying humanity. That's the level it got to. I would try to, we did a lot of emanación, like we would do a lot of light with our hands. If I raised my hand to give out light, I was immediately looked upon as like, what are you doing? What are you doing? So all of a sudden I'm in this mix of fear, shame, all sorts of things. And these are with people that I felt like I had to be with. This was my spiritual past. This was my salvation. This was my redemption. And from there, it started to get really, really bad. A lot of, really negative entities and dreams and phenomena. So that went on for about 6 months, I think. About 6 months. There's hard things that I can't even talk about. I really can't. That's why and that's these things that I could say right now, which I can't say, are things that I entrusted to somebody else. The only person on the planet that I entrusted this to. That's where it goes, guys. Right? I'm not making this up. All right? This is like, so my story. Right? This is my story. And so at one point, we had been building this, we had made a 3-story 11 apartment complex. Each of us was going to move into this complex. I had worked night and day on it. I did the designs with another friend. I even got together enough money and we put in a little swimming pool because it was so bloody hot at the beach. We were putting in the trees in the garden, and so I was packing up I had rented a little apartment meanwhile we were building, and I'd already moved some things in there. I moved in some paintings, little tiny, they were sales. I mean, this was not a luxurious thing. And that was the other thing that kept me there too, because this wasn't about money. This was about, supposedly deep spiritual process. So I was packing and getting ready, and all of a sudden I had a knock on my door, and standing in front of me were 4. I want to call their names out. I'm going to. Kate, Carmen, Carolina, and Rosenda. Okay, my brothers and my sisters, right? Bound by brotherhood and sisterhood. All right, we were actually bound. Those are broken now, and I'm saying this publicly. Those bonds were broken by me several years ago. All right, but we had been bound by word that we were going to be together. Listen to this, friends, for all of eternity. That's where it came in at. All right. They walked into my space, a full frontal attack of a wall of energy. They started packing my clothing and my belongings. They said, "You are leaving now. You've been sentenced. You are leaving." And I had a car at that time. I had no money left. All right. And they, within, I would say about maybe an hour, between 30 minutes and an hour, I had all of my stuff that would fit in my little car that they threw in there. They were standing over me as I packed the suitcase. Beach clothes, thong, like flip-flops, bikinis. I mean, this was my life. I lived at the beach, right? Sarongs, whatever. I mean, when it just got dumped into a suitcase, they had already taken everything out of the apartment we were just going to move into. They threw it into the car. And I wore a gold triangle around my neck. At that time was our symbol. It was 3 triangles within a triangle with a dot in the middle. It was solid gold. Matter of fact, I purchased several of those for the different people. They took that away from me. They asked me to go to the business where I had been running it and established it. I went there in my car with stuff in it. And they said, "We want your laptop." I handed it to them. They took the hard drive out of it, handed it to me, and handed me an envelope with a handwritten sentence in it. And they said, "Leave now." It was in the middle of the afternoon. And you are not allowed, I think they read it to me or said it out loud, that I was not allowed to see my family. I was never allowed to have contact with any of them again. I was never allowed to go back to the beach again. I was never allowed to go to Colima. There's a lot of stuff to do with the volcano there. It's for another talk. And the force, people would ask, "Well, why did you do that, Christine? Why did you not stand up to them?" It was because I was under a spell that had been wrought and forged in me during those 4 years I spent with them. And this wasn't just them. They were being directed by Alejandro and his wife. Right? The same day, another friend of mine was also expelled under similar circumstances. I don't know how he is. Never saw him again. And I found myself driving. So I started north along the Pacific coast of Mexico. And as I was driving, my body started violently shaking. And I didn't know where to go. I didn't know who had it world anymore. I spent the night not very far away in a hotel. I spent that night in absolute terror. I was so ashamed. I felt like I had done the worst thing any human could ever have done. I felt like that's what was put on me. And I don't know, I really don't know what this, even right now as I'm repeating it, now I slept. Right? Later that day, I went to a friend's house. that I knew at the beach. That's an old friend of mine. I was so out of sorts that I was like, literally had to repel myself away from her because I thought, oh my God, if she helps me, she's going to be destroyed too. So I just started driving north. I spent a day in Vallarta, and even when I was in Puerto Vallarta for a day, and I did have at that one moment, I had a blind flash of like, oh my God, I'm free, I'm free, I'm free. So it was such a mix of emotions of between terror and freedom and loneliness and solitude. So I spent one good day in Vallarta and didn't know where to go. So I just kept going north.
I just want to ask there, what was it that they had accused you of? Like, what was it that they wanted to
Crimes
push you away
against
for doing?
crimes against humanity.
What were the terms of that charge? Like, what was that's just a
It was
title,
never
right? So what's the
specified.
terms?
It was never specified. It had to do something with, I can't say it. It's too personal. It's too personal to my family. I can't say it.
Fair.
Okay. When you have somebody you love with all your heart and all your soul, okay, they accused me of protecting that person, right? Family, real family. So, but somehow they twisted that into crimes against humanity. That I hadn't fulfilled I hadn't fulfilled, or I hadn't. If I analyze it now, it's really clear. I was seeing what was going on. My consciousness was waking up, and I became very aware of what's happening. I started having dreams about Alejandro and his wife, and I was having astral battles all night long, in my dreamscape. And so a part of me was like, and I realized they also realized, it's the same as the first shaman I already talked about, that my power was growing through my consciousness. That happened with the first guy too, because he kept saying, where's your power coming from? Where are you getting your power? He wanted to know. So I think they became aware that when I started to go out of resonance with the group think, that it was, I needed to be put down bad. And so, no, I can't say, but yeah, it had something to do with my family.
You did answer my question there, so thank you.
Okay. So, anyways, I had at that time, I had grabbed, fortunately, in the time I was running out the door, some jewelry. I had some gold beads. I had a few like trinkets of that nature. And so I had that with me, and I had 2 credit cards, but no cash, none, zero, nothing. I had no access. My business was gone. My home was gone, where I had lived in central Mexico. All that had gone to build the businesses in the apartment. So, but I'm fortunate because I had some access to something that could keep me going. So I also had, ironically, I had papers. I was in the process of becoming a Mexican citizen, so all my papers were on file in the immigration. So I'm in my car in Mexico with no papers, no legal identity. I had my passport. I did have my American passport, but all my Mexican papers, my residency, everything I had worked years and years to build up, that was all abandoned. And I had to hit the border with no papers. So I just knew, that's all I knew. The only thing I knew at one point was drive north. That was the only thing I could just go north. And I was like, okay, I'll go north. So I drove north out of Mexico. One night I stayed in Torreon, Mexico. Now, and I want everybody to understand this too about Mexico, is probably the most replete with witchcraft country on the planet. Okay, I don't know of any place that has more demonics than this country here. Okay, it's pretty well known. Even among sorcerers, it's pretty well known. All right, so from everything from low-level sorcery to high-level sorcery, it exists here. So I hit Torreon in the middle of a torrential, horrific rainstorm with thunderbolts of lightning, and I got a little cheap room. And that night, and I'm going to tell this because if people don't get this, okay, if they don't get the depth of it, I've never been able to tell it because nobody gets the depth of it. I think with you guys, I can't. That night in that hotel room with lightning and rain, and it was a cheap room, so everything came right through all the walls. I felt like I was in the middle of that storm. One of the parts of my sentence was that I would be recogido por todos los tiempos. I was going to be isolated for all time. That's one of the terms of my curse. If I ever spoke to anybody about this ever again, if I ever had contact with any other group, if I ever turned to my parents' home, if I ever saw my family again, if I ever contacted anybody within the mandato again, that was my sentence. I lived that night. I lived that night. My whole soul body. And I know that there are people that hear this that know this, because anybody that's been MK Ultra, anybody that's been MyLab, okay, anybody that's been through this knows what it feels like. I was picked up and I was lived in absolute isolation from everything, full consciousness of who I was, of everything I'd ever done, and that meant every crime I'd ever committed. That meant every evil deed I'd ever done. That meant every good thing I'd ever been. I was in full consciousness with no way to ever rectify any of it. That's how bad it was. That's the night I don't know how I survived. I don't know why I got let out of it. I know I had to experience it. That's all I know now. That experience is really what drives me. What really gives me the empathy that I have and the compassion that I have. It's a level of deception. It's a level of manipulation that very few have experienced. I would probably even go so far to say we've all experienced it. We just haven't remembered it. So from that night, I drove in full terror. Full terror. My experience was terrifying. And else I knew I could drive north. I had to get to the border. I had to get across the border with no papers. I had to go back into the United States, which was terrifying. I had no money, no job. I was 56 years old, right? Nowhere to go. For me, at that moment in my time in my life, I had nothing. I was going to end up on the street. That's how I felt. I'm sorry, guys. I'm just getting pretty emotional about this. Let me sit with it for a minute. Okay. You know why I'm talking right now? Because this is what we're in for, folks. If you think that right now anything you're doing is having any effect on our planet, if you don't understand that force of evil that wants to put us all in lockdown, if you don't understand what real true terror is, if you haven't confronted your own darkness, if you haven't confronted, you're part of that. And there are those of us that are out here doing this on the edge. And so for that not to be understood, it doesn't make us heroes, it doesn't make us special, we're nothing. We're really nothing. That's what I want to tell you. Okay. So I did make it across the border. As soon as I hit the United States, I was being followed by policemen everywhere. I got pulled over. I got harassed. I was threatened to take to jail because I didn't have car registration. I was on my way to get my car registered and I got pulled over by some really brutal policemen. They threatened me, so that's what, when you're in that space, and this is a good lesson too. I want to say this to some of my dearest friends that are still struggling through these harassments. We get put into these spaces and that our own energy will bring that to us. So there is a way out. All right. We have to find our own inner strength to be able to get out of it, because I lived through that, of bringing that to me through this. And I don't say it in as a judgmental way at all, but that was also done. And it happened, so just a little thing that we can get past these things, and we do have the ability, each of us, to get out of it. But during that time, that's all I could experience. So, so I don't say it with any judgment. That's all I could experience was I drove north and I drove north. And during that time, I was like, where am I going? North, north, north. I'm going, oh shit, I'm going to hit the Canadian border, at some point here. And I realized that I really couldn't go into Canada because I don't have Canadian citizenship. What was I going to do? And I fantasized many things. I fantasized going up into the Canadian Rockies and just like crawling into a cave and dying. That was one of my favorite fantasies. I felt so ashamed of whoever I was at the moment. You just keep going. That's all you do. You just keep going. Many cold nights. It was April of 2008. Yeah, April of 2008. Election time, hey? That was a big time in the United States at that moment. I hadn't lived there for 25 years, so I wasn't even really aware of what was happening there. Thought of going to Canada, and knew that if I went to Canada, I would die because I couldn't be in the dark that much of the year. So one point I was in Wyoming one night, and it was snowing, it was icy, and I just heard Spokane. So I heard Spokane. And that gave me at least enough of some direction. Go to Spokane. So I started at that moment just following little things. Little things, like some little part of me that was going to take me somewhere that I needed to go. And I ended up in Spokane, Washington. That's where I ended. And was able to, it was always a surprise to me because I felt like such a shell that people still related to me, and I could still talk to people. And somehow during those years that I was in Spokane, I somehow reestablished a sense of self. Wasn't a very strong one. I finally got back into doing healing. I ended up, my salvation there was I got a job again now by, I would say intervention. I got a job in a supplement store. And as soon as I was back in that element of being of service and being with other people that were of service, that really brought me back. I still hadn't dealt with a curse. I still hadn't dealt with any of that. I had 2 angel friends, Ben and Max. Thank you. Thank you. And that's why I do what I do, because 2 people, 2 simple people, 2 unknown people, 2 not famous people, 2 ordinary people offered their hand to me and saw my light when I couldn't see it. That's how much that means. So, I don't forget those things. And I don't know how many people right now on the planet need just another being to acknowledge their inner light when they're in their own dark night of their soul. Powerful. It's not magic. It's just people loving people. That's all it is. It's simple. I was blessed. I was blessed with those 2 people in my life. And, all was pretty good. I mean, I'd even, struggled through a lot of things. I'd even, I didn't like working for corporate America at all. It was disgusting and demeaning. And I learned a lot about humility during that, and a lot about how people live, man, if you want to be humble, go get a job, people. Go work in middle-class America or lower America. Go live there and see just how people have to live. It was a very humbling experience. So because I didn't really I don't like bosses. I don't like people telling me what to do. Never have. I started an online jewelry business, and it really was a huge, huge struggle. It took me a good year just to get a website going. And, with a few amount of funds, try doing something on $11 an hour, living in America. I did have those 2 credit cards, so I was able to start a small online business, and just about the time that it started to produce a little bit of income for me, thinking that, oh, okay, well, maybe this is going to be my life now here, and I'm okay with it. I put a few friends doing some satisfying work. I could see that I could get out of the corporate mindset. Um, March 11th came along, and that's Fukushima. By then, I had been spending hours every night and day. I was listening to the internet. I was listening to everybody from Jordan Maxwell. That's when I got into Project Camelot. I listened to David Icke. I mean, I could Michael Tessarian, you name it. I was just, that was my company. I'd go to work and come home, and I'd listen night and day to people. So, at that point, I was really waking up to another aspect of what was happening on the planet. So when Fukushima happened, the first time in my life, I became the whole planet. And I realized that that wasn't an isolated event, but that was going to affect all of us. And it was a very profound moment in a way for me, because my whole world that I had just built again was shattered. And I was like, oh, it became false security. The fact that I had a job, that I had friends, that I had a business, that literally, in a very visceral and visual way, it was like looking at my life that looked pretty nice again. It looked like looking at glass, and it just, like, I watched it come down. It just broke into 1,000 shards again and shattered at my feet. And I was directed to go to Ecuador. I had met a woman at the supplement store, and she was going to manage a hotel in Vilcabamba. I'm going out of the Mondato story, am I? Yeah.
I want to ask a question there, actually.
Yeah.
You've just described a different event where your life kind of fell apart or shattered at your feet, as you explained it. But that one is very different, because that wasn't, that's something that kind of came through you as opposed to through a group, and
Yes.
was
Yeah.
pushed onto you. So are you able to perhaps describe the difference in how that felt for you?
Yeah. What I realized in that moment was that I had, in my need of feeling secure in the world, had managed again to build up a world dynamic, or a world matrix around me. So even while I had, like, I had, at that point, I had all the knowledge about, what was happening, the black government, black ops, I had all of that going. I knew about the FEMA camps. I knew everything in that way. But I realized that what had happened there was I had built a false paradigm for myself that I thought was secure. And so when that shattered, I knew at that moment that that wasn't from outside of me. You're right; it wasn't. I hadn't completed yet. I knew that was fake. I knew I would never be satisfied with it. I knew that having a nice job in middle class America, and having a nice looking apartment and all that, and being in the business again, my consciousness knew full on that was not going to satisfy me. So yeah, very different, Shane. I'm glad you point that out. So that's that. That is the case of that. I'm still under the curse at this moment, though. I'm still under. I haven't told anybody about it. My two good friends know that something very deep happened to me. Oh, I also pulled in some pretty interesting dark people into my life while I was in Spokane. Another story. But they were so beautiful to me, and they would always say, well, we don't know what you went through, Christine. We don't know. We just love you. It was that simple,
Should be
So
that simple. That's what the first four or however many groups should have been able to say to you at that point, instead of pushing someone out. Like, let's just back up for a second here. You're in a group dynamic. Within that group dynamic, you notice someone who, let's just say that you're all in the consensus that is a dark being, and that being has a problem, and that being has, call it whatever you want, call it an entity attachment, call it whatever kind of possession. How are you helping that being by throwing them out into the world? Like by breaking them down and then pushing them away. I understand defeating the demon or taking away the entity or anything to that nature in it, but to ostracize the person at the end of it, are you really helping at that point? Let's just say that you don't do anything to accomplish helping that person before you push them out into that world. Essentially what you're doing is you're taking a loaded gun and you're throwing it out into the street for someone to find. And even that way of looking at it is not a good approach. So that approach that you found in Spokane, that we don't care where you've been, we love you and we want to help you, that should have been the approach from the first group as well. And it wasn't because it was a lesson you needed to learn, granted. I'm just saying in general, if you find yourself in that situation, instead of shoving that person away from you, maybe do what you can to help. And don't have the expectation that you're going to help them, you're going to heal them, because that's not the way things work. But you can give it your best shot before you throw them away.
I'm going to go a little, I think, hang on just a second. I'm seeing some messages pop up here, and I don't know if it's a question or... Okay, nothing already. I'm sorry. I'm just distracted, but that's okay, because we're kind of breaking into something here. And I don't mind, because if anything I have within me is a teaching, right? I mean, my experience, like Shane's experience, is a teaching. Claudia's is a teaching. We're each other's teachers and we're each other's students, You said it in the beginning, Shane, I don't even know if this got on the recording, is that each of us is a unique being, all right? I mean, we have an entity, even, we could call ourselves. We have an ID, we have an identity. And then that identity is expressing from how deep we get into our essence. We can't really fully discard all of that. But in the Mandato, they called it the ego deidad, which is our God divine ego, or our essence, or our essential self, right? And so what I've learned during all of this is to peel away the layers and the false belief systems and the matrices. All of that is to get to that essence. Everything that's been around us, all these creations and all these false beliefs and these false matrices and everything has kept us from that. So I'll say right here, for me, I chose this. I take 100% responsibility for my choices. I chose this for my own self, and I think we all do ultimately, right? I chose this lesson. I obviously, at some level of my being, chose to go through this. So I don't blame, not here to blame anybody for it, but even this moment that I'm speaking right now, to the people that I'm speaking to the situation that I'm immersed in, I still chose this. So what am I going to do with it? And what you just said, Shane, is like, it's a duality. And I'll put this out here now for us to consider, okay? I don't have the answer to it. When I look for a state of being that I could call freedom, that's the state of a completed aspect of this being that I am, that is in touch with that ego deidad, or that inner divine me, at getting closer to my core and my essence. I'm not using my ego, my false beliefs, my false moralities to make any decision. So, and I'm free from those moralities, and I'm free from those false beliefs. So any instant, anything that comes up, what I do, my endeavor, which has become more and more of what I am, I listen inside. I wait until a movement moves me. Now, that movement may, to others, look like it's not very kind sometimes. I can be fierce. It may be in this situation that we're dealing with in PA and BR and all of that, and all this is coming up. It may look to a lot of people like I'm doing something to cause harm, but I know I'm not. I'm trying to reveal something for a being, okay, a very beautiful being that's trapped in his own complex, his own matrix of his own making. And I'm trying to bring forth my fiercest love in that. I was subjected to that, okay? At one level, I decided and it was done. That's it, right? And so love can shine in many ways, friends. It doesn't just come through the kindest word. Love is felt, love is known. Love is felt, it is known. And until we know love in ourselves and for ourselves, and we forgive ourselves for all of it, and then when we can peel away in the crucible of our own being, then we can start to shine at one another with a surety. Goes to surety without doubt, all right? That light is going to have an effect that needs to have, not because my ego wants any outcome, but because it just is so. So that's my thing about that. Like, I don't know. People don't, I don't know what anybody needs. I really don't. I know everybody needs love. That's all I know. That's all I know. And I know there are beings out there, there are people so deep within their own darkness that they know not love. This is my whole passage, was that I could learn to know love. My biggest fear when I came into this world is that I would never know love, that I was incapable of knowing love. That was my shame. That was my guilt. That was my fear. That was everything came from that, from the time of the tiny child that I was. My first memories are, I'm not lovable. I don't know love. I'm not lovable. Those are my first, I'm guilty. I was guilty when I was baby coming in, so, that's what I want to get is like, how do we, the people, the divine sovereign beings on this planet, get to that place in ourselves that is beyond doubt and fear? That's why I really want to talk today, and so, yeah. And so I have to say right now, Ecuador, something in me and spirit aligned and moved me to Ecuador, right? Where I thought I was going to the end of the world. My little head at the time said, I'm going to the end of the world. At 2008, everybody remembers what was happening? 2011? America was going to fall. The whole economic system was coming down, right? Right? Mike Adams and the health ranger was in Vilcabamba. I was going to the one safe place on the planet where I was going to survive. That's how I saw it, And I felt, well, your life's over, Christine, but that's okay. You're going to be safe. Kind of a weird thought like that. But that's how I saw it, right? And, and I'm still running from the curse, you see. I'm still running from that which haunts me. I'm still running from what hasn't been resolved. I'm still trying to find safe haven. We have to look at that, don't we? Safe haven. Anyways, Ecuador. I'm in Ecuador. I'm running a hotel called Madre Tierra. Well, that's something else. Can I say this here? Because I'm on a roll. Each individual here, okay, listening, me, we all have an epic life. And that epic life is shown to us. The names of the places, the names we are given, the names of our friends, the numbers we see. All of that is a really deep, rich tapestry when we can kind of get out of the surface judgmental self and start to really like, whoa, everything's talking to us. So I'm in Madre Tierra, Mother Earth, there I am, the health ranger's there, the whole thing is like, it's supposed to be the new Garden of Eden. And who walks through the door 2 weeks later? Bill Ryan. Him and Anelia were there doing a conference up at Monte Sueños, up at the Mountain of Dreams. Right? And while I had listened to, quite a bit of Camelot at that point, so I knew who he was. I didn't really have gaga goo goo eyes. The whole town was abuzz with his presence, and which is is all I heard, because this hotel that I managed had a big veranda restaurant, and everybody came there, and so that was kind of a big social gathering place. And so he walked in the door one morning. I was in my pajamas making my coffee in the restaurant for the hotel. We weren't open yet. And he turned around, and when he turned around and looked, I went, oh, you're Bill Ryan, right? Had coffee. I sat with him for 4 hours that day. Didn't even get out of my pajamas, didn't get up and attend the people in the restaurant at all. We just talked. And, at that point, I'm still feeling, I had no real sense of myself. I was quite frightened, frankly. I was very unsure. And so all of a sudden I felt like I had a big male presence in my life. Somebody was feeding back to me that I was okay because I had met Bill Ryan. So that's where that one went. And I will say to him, I've said it to him many times in person, looking eye to eye. I am so grateful for everything he gave me in that time and everything he helped me with and every ounce of energy that he poured into me to help me bring out this whole curse thing. He did that for me. He really did do that for me. That's why it's so difficult right now to have it turn. There's a reason for it. I get it. There is a reason for it. Just that's okay. This is not a blame game thing. It really isn't. But it was, a really amount of dedication during that time. And so little by little, those layers started coming off. And it took about a year and a half. It was involved with some other people that did real professional auditing sessions on me. I am very grateful to them also. I'm not into Scientology, never have been. Matter of fact, I have a lot to say about that at some point. But with somebody that's ethical, some really important work was done. And I count the woman that helped me, my friend to this day. And I love you. I love you. I really do. I mean, she's ethical. She's an ethical healer. That's what she is. And she knows what she's about. And so really what happened, Shane, really at that time is I started to, I was able to go, this is the psychic bonding and all the ties that are hooked onto a curse of that nature. I was able to start peeling them away and getting them out of my energy field. And as that was happening, Christine came back finally, who we call Christine right now. She started to find she had a voice again. She started to find out that she was a real being again. Before that time, really, honestly, I was just an act. Always surprised that people would like me. Always surprised that people would think I was cool or okay or nice or anything, because inside I was an act. Inside I was empty. So to start that process of reestablishing my own inner, at the point when I was first there, it's very different when you depend on who you are by looking at how the world views you, which is what I was caught in. I was really dependent on how people viewed me because I didn't have anything inside at that point. So good point for people to think about. How dependent are you on others' projections onto you or how they see you? It's a good point. It's a good point to look at. Part of the reason I got, into the situation I got into. But yes, yeah. So as these layers, as these false things, these things that had been bonded and wrought into me and embedded in me through fear tactics, many numerous ways. I mean, it was pretty heavy duty stuff. As those layers came back, I came back. And with that coming back, I started to be able to move back into those spaces myself. I started to be able to go back to the beach astrally. I started to confront the people that had put the curse on me. I was able to stand in front of them astrally. Of course, I didn't go back there physically. And I started pulling out my energy. And I went into the cafe. I went into the building that I had built. I went back to all my stuff that they still had. They had my most precious stuff. They have a diamond ring of mine. They have a statue that was given to me that's 1,000 years old of who I supposedly was in India. So they had severe items to do magic on me with. Let's just put it that way. So I just really had to go into those spaces, and anybody can do this work themselves. If you feel like there's somebody that's manipulating you, you are able to do that. And you can, by your own sovereign law, by your own word, revoke these things. You have to get a certain amount of energy, and you don't have to have be full on. You just have to know that I'm here. And you can start to unwind these things. And so that what was happening. And as that happened, all right, as I was able to more and more get solid, then all of a sudden in my life again here in Ecuador, I started getting demonic attacks again. Immediately. I was getting electronic attacks. I was getting demonic attacks. It was like something didn't want me to get back to me. And so I went through the next 2.5, almost 3 years of some more serious shit. I'm sorry, it's not fun. You get tired of it after a while. So, but I learned and I learned and I learned and I got back to myself. And I'm going to give something that I would like to give out to anybody that might, oh gosh, I don't know if I should. I'm not professional. I'm sorry. I got to have a little humor here. Sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. But come on, people, let's laugh a little. My God, come on.
Start the whole world laughing.
Right, exactly. I want to do this. I want the Shane Ugly dance. I'm going to interject it right here. Okay. Do I have your permission, Shane?
Absolutely.
Okay, good. I've gone through all these roller coasters of emotion. Let's bring some humor into this. Oh my God, it's a farce. Okay, my professional self never was. Okay, but my life lessons, if I'm talking, let me share that, okay? During this time of demonic attacks again, it was bad. I was like being thrown on the floor. I was being face slammed into things. I was being pushed down stairs, but I wasn't succumbing to it in the way I had before, right? But here's that thing. Bill, here's that thing. If you think you need an enemy to prove that you're right, you're wrong. Okay? We were calling in all our own enemies. Okay? There's a belief system out there in this freaking, what do you want to call it? Conspiracy theory, twisted new age movement that has become that we prove ourselves by the amount of enemies that we have. That's a falsehood. That's a lie. But it sure keeps the dark side happy, doesn't it? As long as you're doing that, man, you're going to get slammed.
It's also a tactic. It's called creating a monster to save other people from, which is part of, we've talked before about savior paradigm, something that many people are affected by. Well, a part of that is the hero paradigm.
Right.
What the hero will come along and he'll create a monster to fight, just like creating their own enemy, but other people see him do that and look at him as a hero, or her as a hero, or them as a heroes, right?
Exactly.
And so you've created something to protect others from.
Right. It's so well put. It goes. We could go really deep into that. It's not the place right now, but that whole savior meme, the savior meme and the victim meme. There they are. They're interlocked as can be. And if you're either one, you're right there. Right? And usually the savior has victim. The savior will always have victim locked in itself. It has to. It has to. Just look at it, friends. So if we're on a pathway here of soul sovereignty, the recovery of our soul essence, the recovery of our divine sovereign beingness, it's a state of being that is inherent in every one of us. Every single, from the darkest to the lightest, it's inherent in us. And we're all here right now. So what helped me, and I wanted to, and this is something that came again from the Mandato Alejandro experience. He would always talk about our cosmic position. I never knew what he meant. But he would talk about it all the time. Your cosmic position. Tu posición cósmico, he would say, And I think all of us sat there and scratched our heads and what's he talking about? He was a great teacher, guys. All right. He was teaching from the dark hand side. All right. He was a great teacher because he didn't ever tell us anything really. He would just put these things out there and it was like, you guys figure it out. Right. So that always stuck with me though. Just like certain things that came through Carlos Castaneda and Don Juan, just certain things, follow the path of the heart. Right? They stuck with me. I cling to nothing. Therefore, I have nothing to defend. They're simple teachings, but they're deep, right? So those phrases had always stayed with me. This posición cósmico. What's that? Right? And so during these really hard times of, lots of upheaval with our partners and demonic attacks, and I mean, there was a period of I don't know, weeks where because what I had learned how to do was starting to get active again. So I was popping into these astral planes and I was popping into the control mechanisms. And I mean, I can't even remember how many times I'd pop into a space. I felt like, one of those pop-up dolls. And all of a sudden you're in a space and everything in that space turns around and looks at you. And they're like, what are you doing here? And you go, oh shit, man, what am I doing here? So I started to see a lot of the way the psychoelectronical warfare was going on through the satellites, through HARP, through all of that was coming really. And I started to learn how to trace it back to where it was being sourced from. So obviously I became a known energy on their radar. So I went through microwave frequency frying. I went through all sorts of things that went on for a while, to the point I had such vertigo that I would walk sideways, and, to even get out of bed took me an hour in the morning because my head spun so much, So, these are all things I'm not saying to get any attention to me but they're things that are happening to a lot of people. And the fact is that they're not happening to me now. So, so my posición cósmico. So because I didn't know with what so much was going on around us on all levels, I started to get up in the morning early again, and I would go sit. And this is another thing that for those of you that suffer, maybe you know it or don't, is one of the most important things that you can do is have a space that's your own energy space that you create for yourself that's safe, whether it's a chair, a room, a closet. It doesn't really matter, but it's a place that you can hold your energy in and to start to develop it again, especially if you're being ripped apart constantly by these type of attack modalities. So yeah, I chose a chair and I started to sit there and listen and developed a certain amount of awareness. And then it came to me that I am the I that I, which is my ultimate state of my consciousness, is located in a time and space coordinate. And that became my cosmic position. So I would just sit there and I would locate myself. It was inside me. It wasn't outside there in outer space or anything. It was inside of me. And I found this space in me, this point almost in myself, that I would say that's my time space coordinate, and that's my cosmic position, and that's inside of me, and that is me. And so from that point of view, I started to be able to, instead of me being pulled off into all these other attack vectors and things that were going on, I started to create my own center of gravity. And I started my own inner magnetism or vortex, if that's a way to describe it, to use energetic terms for it. And when I got to a point that was cohesive enough, then everything started to change. I don't know how to teach these things. I really don't. I don't know if you have anything similar, either you, Claudia, or you, Shane, to that, because we're pulled off into so many outers all the time that, in the ultimate, there's no outer, no inner, but that became really important for me to establishing myself. And
it's important for us all to establish that within ourselves, and sometimes it does take going through the processes like you did to, going through the group process to realize that you don't really need that group process. And although the teachers have come along at the right times for you, they're again something you didn't necessarily need. It was again just a guide. It's not someone to make these things real for you. It's someone to inspire you to make them real for yourself. Mm-hmm. And once you got to Ecuador, it sounds like that's what you figured out, was that all that time, all those little phrases, your cosmic position, mm-hmm. all those things were just indicators so that you could look for that cosmic position, and you found it exactly where all of that teaching was leading you, and that's back inside yourself.
Right. Which is, I was thinking about before we started this conversation that I'm realized that, there are, yeah, I don't like to use words that we're so accustomed to. I would try to make a descriptors on them because we talk about soul, we talk about spirit, we talk about a lot of these things, and those words are so contaminated at this point that they mean so many things. Like even talking about love, you don't feel love. The word, I mean, who knows what it means to how many different people. So, but I was realizing that in this moment that we're living, and this is why it's so important, friends, that, this is let's not, why are we locked in a who's right and wrong paradigm right now? I mean, it's insane to me to see how easily we are pulled apart from each other and how easily we are led into, accusatory statements and making somebody else wrong so we can be right. But in that dynamic, in that duality, we need to understand actually duality. We really need to understand what duality is, what does it do for us, and why are we experiencing it? These are questions. I'm not going to get into anything about it myself. I write about this all the time. But there's also another aspect of each of us being unique. And I realize sitting here with these two beautiful beings that I'm with Shane and Claudia, I mean, man, I wanted to start this by saying, I'm so honored to be able to share this journey with you right now. And I'm so honored that you came here. You see, because there are beings and there's so many of them. I'm one I'm one that's been here for a really long time. It doesn't mean that I haven't had all these other experiences and all these other universes and these other realities. I've had them. I mean, I have plenty of memories of them, different things. But I've been a part of, we'll call her Mother Earth, Gaia, Sophia, the goddess personality, if we want to call her that which came out of the pleroma, came out of the cosmic center and embodied herself on this planet, this jewel planet. So I'm very deeply enmeshed in her. And this is what I'm learning right now is I'm coming back to myself and in my own little tiny piece of me that is all of her too. And then there's those of Shane, as I understand them, as Claudia, and others that came from super expanded states and brought themselves purposely down into this matter to be here right now. How excruciatingly painful that is. How it is for a being of that magnitude to be locked into a physical form and compressed into this body. So none of us have the same journey. And we've got to get away from thinking that. We have to get away from projecting our own journey onto another and saying, you're wrong. You don't know what you're talking about. I'm going to go after you and prove you're wrong, buddy, because I'm not capable of understanding you. This is so not what we're here to do right now. And it's so what I'm about, if I can speak as, from every part of every particle, soul, vibration, aspect of what I understand about life at this point, of what I understand about the cosmic journey that we're all on. We are on a living, beautiful being. And not just is she here, man, she's got the whole cosmos in her too, and beyond. And we're having internet wars, we're having forum wars, that's the part I don't get. And yet it's got to be serving a purpose, right? Let's make this a purposeful journey together. Let's have enough courage to examine ourselves and not project our own darkness on another being. If there's enough in the world, bring your own light out of your own darkness. That's the only way you're going to get through. You have to go into the darkness, into your own darkness. It's not going to happen otherwise. Happen for some, I guess. That this is why I feel like, in spite of what it may look like, oh my God, Christine and Claudia got slammed, man. It isn't fair. It isn't right. Nothing will make it right. Nothing will make it right that somebody re-evokes a curse and wants to throw it on people. Nothing will make it right, okay, that somebody wants to harm another and purposely does so. But let's turn this experience into something positive. We can all do that individually. Okay, this is an individual journey. Each person listening to me right now, okay, each person that has taken a side, get away from your sides. I've been saying for 2 years, 3 years, anybody that's ever read anything I ever wrote, I've been saying there are no rights and no wrongs, so get out of it, folks. The journey's in the place in between those two things. The journey comes when you finally implode within yourself and your own being, your own darkness with your own light. Then the real journey starts. You know, so it's so absurd. It's so absurd. Okay? I mean, it's so beyond absurd that I have to think. I have to thank the divine intelligence that is moving this forward right now. It's so obvious that this is what's happening. It's being shown to us. See it? There I go, off my soapbox. Sorry.
No, thank you. Said a lot of things that I think were important for you to get the chance to say.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, part of wanting to introduce you and having you tell this whole story is to show people that we all have a voice, and everyone with a voice has a right to use their voice. And if they are so inspired to do so, they should do so. And they shouldn't worry about who is, I'll throw in my own little catchphrase here, vouching for them or backing them or believing in them or supporting them. It's your voice. If you have conviction in your voice, then use your voice, and don't look for everyone else to agree.
But once you find your voice, you won't criticize anyone else ever. I mean, you know, you can make fun and you can laugh and you can do all sorts of things, right? You can see what they're doing is wrong. Okay, I mean, I have to put it in quotation marks. I mean, you can see when somebody's either causing harm, or you can see when they're manipulating the realities, or you can see a lot of things. You can simply see. You become the observer, and you are the testimony to what you see. But really, once you found your voice, like Shane, I mean, anybody ever said anything about him, they thought they knew him. I mean, this is your infinite patience. I mean, you have infinite patience. Like, I'm so astounded by it. I don't, but I have passion. I have love and I have passion, and I have so much coming and moving through me that I need to express it. I don't, take it or leave it, folks. Really. We all have a voice. Find yours. Write a blog. Open a YouTube channel. Let's get out of these massive loosh farming forums, okay? That whatever the noble purpose they were set up for, they become loosh farms. Okay? Wherever there's a large group of people following another, there are loosh farms. You're giving your energy to that which wishes to control and consume you. Step out of it. Doesn't mean you have to leave. I'm not saying give up memberships. I would, but well, no, I didn't. I didn't give up a membership. I was expunged. I was expelled. But what I'm trying to really get at is like, step out of your comfort zone. Okay, you don't need approvals, so step out one little bit. You're all magnificent. You're all awesome. You're all wonderful, extraordinary beings. You wouldn't be here if you weren't. That's really it. And I probably will have to just kind of I don't know if I told enough, said enough, didn't say enough. I just said what I said.
And that's it. And, I just want to kind of end with saying that it's very important to, find your voice. So what I would call that is owning your light. And just as important as owning your light is being able to stand up and own your dark. And that is what Christine has kind of shown for you here today. Is, she said a lot of things about her history that, depending on your point of view, could make you could be deemed as negative aspects or mistakes that she's made or things that she's done, in quotes, wrong. But she's owned it, and she's stood up from it, and she's learned from it, and she's grown from it, and she's honest about it. And that's really all any of us can do. And that's exactly what we all need to do. That's, bringing the shadow to light.
Yeah, and bringing right. I mean, and it's oh, there's a lot to say, but I'll leave it at that. And I'm just very grateful, and to my dear Claudia, you speak now. I have to learn not to be the voice for the empaths of the world. I don't want to become something that, and that's another thing. This is not about anything I say. Find your own path, folks. Go ahead, Claudia. Love you, dear.
For the record, I'm standing fully beside Christine in all she said. I've had the gift of not only knowing her for a good 3 years now, but also getting to know her personally over the past 6 weeks or so. And I thank Bill Ryan for facilitating this meeting, because without Bill Ryan, I would never have met you.
Yes.
As to the moderators of Project Avalon, where is your courage? Where is your truth? Some of you met me in person. Others of you have been talking to me, or were talking to me, for the better part of 4 years. And I cannot believe how shallow you have become over the past year. Did any of you ever ask me or Christine what was going on? No, you did not. Nor did all your and allegedly our friends, the members of Project Avalon, who came licking our asses while we were moderators. And all I can say is shame on you, and may you wake up. Thank you.
Thank you, Claudia. As we speak our truth, I stand with Claudia, and I stand with Shane, and I stand with all true beings who have made their own passage through their own self and their own beingness. I have said so many times to those that have stood with me, and I stand with them, there is something called trust and honor, and those are qualities. And they're sadly lacking on what's happening right now. Nobody asked us. They allowed us to be made their enemy. And I will say for Claudia, I will speak this for her, because I've sat with her in her home when all of this was coming down, and I watched her take, for me, okay, a great deal of the attacks in her body. And I watched her hold in suffering her own broken heart from what was a true betrayal of what she had given for years and years and years, and not just to the moderators. And so did I. That's pain. That's a suffering. But I, inside of me, and she inside of her, turn that suffering within the crucible of the heart back into flow and love and positive action. She's an amazing, and I thank her. I thank her from the very depth of my being. And I thank Shane for being here. And I thank those that follow their own inner truth. All of you that follow your own inner truth, that know that there's a path called gnosis. Know thyself. All of you, I thank you. There's no doubt in you. There's no need to attack another in you. It's so apparent once you see it, friends. Just look. Thanks, darling. I love you.
All right. Well, thank everyone, and everyone take care of themselves for us, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Okay.